Okay, class, so today for notes, we're just going to be doing a review of factoring. The important thing here is that you don't necessarily need to write down every single thing that I'm writing because we already have this all in our notes. So what I think might be more useful is if you open your notebooks and you flip in your notes to the start of the factoring unit. And you'll sort of be able to flip through and follow through in your notes and answer the questions that are coming up in here just using that, so that hopefully we just get our brains back into the rules of factoring. Okay, if you need more help than just this video to remind yourself, you might need to go back previously into Canvas Weeks and watch the videos that are in more detail for each topic. So the first topic we should find when we're looking at our factoring notes is prime factoring and finding a GCF, but we don't really need those. Our actual factoring piece was factoring out a GCF. Okay, so that's the first one we're gonna look at. Oops, GCF. So let's say we were given 12a to the fourth b plus 8ab squared. And we want to factor out a GCF. So the GCF says the largest number that we can think of that will go into both terms. So the first thing we're going to do is ask ourselves, okay, what will go into 12 that will also go into 8? And hopefully we're picking a 4. And then we're going to check the variables, right? We first want to make sure that they both have the variable. And then how do we decide what exponent to pick? Right, we want to pick the smallest exponent. So our smallest exponent here is 1. So we want to pull out an a or an a to the first. Then we're going to do the same thing. They both have a b. So what are we going to pull out for that? Right, we should be pulling out b because that's our smallest exponent. Okay, and then we're going to start dividing this out. So when we start dividing, right, 12 divided by 4 gives us 3. Now, when we divide, what do we do with these exponents? We should be subtracting. So 4 minus 1 gives us 3. 1 minus 1 gives us 0, so there's no b left. That cancels out. 8 divided by 4 gives us 2. 1 minus 1 is 0, so again, the a's cancel out. 2 minus 1 is 1, so we have a b left. We're not quite finished though, right? Remember, we put this in parentheses and we pull this GCF over here in front. And so our final answer is 4ab times 3a to the third plus 2b. Okay, so let's take a look at the next one. The next type, so you might have to flip a page in your notebook depending on where you're at. The next type of factoring that we looked at was factoring by grouping. And so when we are factoring by grouping, how many terms does a problem have to be able to be factored by grouping? 4 terms. Factoring by grouping happens when we have 4 terms. So let's say we have x to the third plus 4x minus 3x squared minus 12. Okay, and to factor by grouping, the very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to chop this in half, right? We sort of took 2 and we put those to each side. So we're going to look at first just this left-hand side over here. And we're going to factor out the GCF just like we did above, right? So we want to know what we can factor out of x to the third and 4x. So, well, 1 and 4 is just 1, but they do both have the x, so we can pull out an x. So when we divide that out, that leaves us with x times 3 minus 1 is 2 plus 4. Okay, then we're going to flip and we're going to look at the right-hand side. Okay, so the first piece we're looking at is, right, what goes into 3 that also goes into 12? We can pull out a 3, but what did we need to do when this leading coefficient, when this first number on the right-hand side was negative? We should be factoring out a negative, which means we really want our GCF to be negative 3. Okay, so when we divide out this negative 3, we'll be left with an x squared. That's positive because a negative and a negative is positive. A negative divided by a negative is positive. And then how often should we be getting these binomials to match? Right, all the time. They have to match. If they don't match, we did something wrong. Because our final answer, we're then taking our GCFs and we're putting them together in one binomial. So an x minus 3. And then an x squared plus 4, which is the binomial that they have in common, is our other one. So our final answer is an x minus 3 and an x squared plus 4. Okay, so moving right along, the next type of factoring that we looked at was trinomials. And the first type of trinomials that we looked at were trinomials when A was not equal to 1. That's what we did first. Okay, so trinomials means 3 terms, right? And it had to be in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. So let's say we have 6d squared plus 17d plus 7. What did we say we would do first for trinomials? We need to multiply a times c. So 6 times 7 is 42. And then we started listing all those sort of pairs going down the list. So we would say 1 and 42, 2 and 21. Let's see, 3 and 14, 4 and nothing, 5 and nothing, 6 and 7. Okay, then we needed to find the set that would add up to B. So B is 17. So which set over here do we want to pick? We should be picking 3 and 14, right? And because this is an addition followed by an addition, we should be picking both positive numbers. Now, we can't use the shortcut on this one, so we needed to split this 17 up, and we used these two numbers. So that was a positive 3D and a positive 14D. And our first number came out in front, and our last number came down at the end. Okay, once we were here, what did we do to finish up this problem? We just need to finish factoring this by grouping using those same rules we did on the last problem, right? So we'll split this in half. Our GCF over here is going to be a 3D. Okay, so that leaves us with a 2D plus 1. Again, you don't need to write this all down. So if you're like, wow, I wouldn't have got that as fast as I did, it's fine, don't worry. Again, it's just reminding you the process. And then we do the same thing over here on the right. This has a GCF of 7. So we get a 2D plus 1. Our final answer, we're putting our two GCFs together, so a 3D plus 7. And then our common binomial, which is a 2D plus 1. All right, next type of factoring that we looked at, we're almost there, we only have 2 types left. The next type of factoring that we looked at was factoring still trinomials, but now it's trinomials where A equals 1. So instead of ax squared plus bx plus c, right, it was just x squared plus bx plus c. So let's say we have y squared minus 12y plus 32. So we're still going to start the same, right? 1 and 32 gives us 32. And we're going to make our list. 1 and 32, 2 and 16, 3 and nothing, 4 and 8, 5 and nothing, 6 and nothing. So that's our list. Now, here we don't have all positives. So remember, we should have a table that's like ax squared plus bx plus c, and it tells us 2 positives. So what types of signs do we need to use when we have a subtraction and then an addition? We should have both negatives, right? So we want both negatives. And then we can find that a -4 and a -8 add up to our -12. Now, on this one, we're able to use a shortcut. So we should be able to go straight to the factored form, where we just went straight to 2 binomials. We used the variable, and then we use the 2 numbers, right? This isn't squared because y times y would be the y squared. And then we're just using the -4 and the -8, and that's our factored answer. The last type of factoring that we talked about was factoring special cases. And special cases came with a few more rules. Okay, so special cases we used with how many terms? Okay, 2 terms. What did the sign have to be? Has to be subtraction. And both terms have to be what? Perfect squares. Okay, so let's say we're given 50x squared minus 128. Now, this is a piece that we looked at the very end. It wasn't on the test, but it was part of the e-learning. So right now, we're looking at a problem that has two terms. It is subtraction, but these are not both perfect squares, right? There isn't a number times itself that gives us 50. So we talked about the idea that sometimes we would have to incorporate multiple types of factoring, which means when we look at this, the first thing that we can do is say, oh, look at that, there's a GCF. My GCF is 2. So if I factor out that GCF of 2, that leaves me with 25x squared minus 64. And then once we got the GCF factored out, we would then focus inside. Okay, and that now is a special case. It's two terms, it's subtraction, and they are in fact perfect squares. Okay, so we would say a number times itself that gives us 25 is 5, or we would take the square root of it. What did we have to do with the exponent? We took half of it. Okay, a number times itself that gives us 64 is 8. So we would put two binomials where we kept the exact order of these values. So 5x comes first, so it's first. 8 comes second, so it's second. What were our signs that we would use? We need one addition and we need one subtraction. Now for this final answer, we can't forget that that 2 is also part of it. It comes down in front. And so here's our completed factor form.